We will stand on principle, or we will not stand at all.
Hi everyone, this is Thierry Ruiz here for another episode of Principal Discord. This time we are with Like and with Richard Olsen, the founder of Like, I believe the first exchange in Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you for being here, Richard. Tell us a little bit about the story of Like and how you came to this field.
Great pleasure. Thanks for kind of coming here and doing this interview. Great pleasure. So for me, it has been a long journey. I've always been passionate about kind of transforming financial markets, democratizing it, and making them truly efficient as nature is and its beauty. So way back, I co-founded a company called Onda, which was disrupted the foreign exchange field and made retail FX trading, brought it to a new level. I was early fascinated by blockchain. Remember end of 2011, I suddenly realized, my goodness, we can use Bitcoin, but actually blockchain to change and make financial markets efficient. I tried to convince the team at Onda to embrace that, didn't succeed, and then said, look, I start the next crazy venture. And this is how in 2015, I launched Like. And we have two things which we want to do. One is drive liquidity, make markets liquid. And second is open up the market so that an Apple Tesla share can be tokenized. And just as you transfer Ethereum or Bitcoin, let's be able to make transferable any share or any other asset. That's the dream.
Yeah, I think you're touching on the two major points of today's market. One is liquidity and price discovery, and we're going to go back to that in a minute. And the second one is just the natural transition of a former technology that is pretty centralized to one that is not decentralized, and by that I mean also the efficiencies that can be gained by removing intermediaries. I was actually looking at the different brokers not so long ago, and I saw that everybody was still mentioning the stamp duty. There's still the stamping and the clearing and settlement, and all of this is still pretty backwards, actually. So how does the blockchain improves the efficiency of an exchange?
So first, two things which have to be known. So as long as we have a centralized exchange, there is no efficiency gain a priori, except one important thing, the ability to transfer assets out anytime.
Right.
And today, there is a new way of living, immediate access to your funds, transferred immediately. That's the first dramatic change which is happening.
Yes. Now, to play devil's advocate, if you decentralize too much, you can also have inefficiencies, right? So right now you see Ethereum transactions are crazy to execute. How can you reconciliate high frequency trading, which also plays into the liquidity of things, with decentralization? Is too much decentralization also a bad thing?
So, of course, but I have to explain there's something very important. I mean, I have grown up when computers started to come. And then first people thought, oh, you have a chip that big and then you have a transistor. No, technology is subtle. So what we have to do in the financial system, and when we embrace blockchain, cryptos, etc., we have to create a subtle financial system, which takes intelligence, engineering insight. And so today, a big issue in the marketplace is that you have crypto, just aficionados, they just build. But we need a real engineering discipline to make sure that the right infrastructure is put in place.
Well, is it not that what we're seeing today is the Wild West? I mean, it's like the 1980s of the secondary market, with pump and dump schemes, with spoofing, with front running, and all of that being done by at least being done by a lot of bad players in the market, and it seems like we have no rules here, and maybe it's coming. So what do you say about those? How can we trust exchanges? How can we look at the future and say, okay, this is gonna solve itself? Do we need regulators more?
So I mean, you're raising all the important questions. So, and there are many answers. So, first of all, of course, there will be good and bad players, and it's so fascinating. It's upfront. You don't know who will be the good ones and the bad guys.
Mm.
So, to succeed in this space, you have to bring two things together. Once a clear kind of insight of how to build, and the ability to execute. And it's not both, sometimes goes in hand in hand. You have to build the right team, you have to get funding. So that's a challenge which is very important. The second thing is that we have to educate regulators, and most important, the insiders. They have to be proactive and self-regulate.
Yeah.
And
I also am not a big fan of I also am not a big fan of regulators. I think bad apples die by themselves most of the time. But there is a case to be made. Last time I spoke to a regulator, I said, look, like, you don't need to create new rules. Just apply the same rules and import them. Just press the button of upload and import them. But what would be your approach? What is Lieke doing in order to prevent bad practices?
So first of all, I don't want to say what is Lieke doing, because it's very easy to just promise. But what we have to do going forward is we have to be very proactive and put processes in place which prevent malpractices.
Yeah.
So as opposed to waiting for the regulators to impose, we have to anticipate and make our tools much safer than what is existing. So just to use a case in point, Lieke has been heavily involved in the Open VASP initiative.
Yeah.
And that's the travel rule of how, you move assets, you share KYC, ALM information. And there, it's important that what we have done is we have created a business suite to implement this Open VASP protocol, make it easy to deploy.
Mm.
And if other players embraced this Open VASP protocol, we can clean up the whole space very fast.
Yeah, but is it not going against the pseudonymous idea of the blockchain? Because right now it's not anonymous; it's mostly pseudonymous, right? So, where do you stand in terms of privacy? Because my feeling from regulators is that on the one side they want all the information, but on the other side they want GDPR and they want you to collect none of the information. So it's really hard to please them at the end of the day.
Yes, but what always puzzles me, if you think of how your body works and how the DNA works and how a cell works, in your body. So both is important. I mean, you need DNA, which you can read, you can share. Your body has 10 trillion times the same DNA. Incredible, but it's nicely compartmentalized. And in the same spirit, we have to create subtle solutions to address all those issues. There is not just, one big statement. No, we have to, and this is why the concept of smart contracts is so interesting, is we can start to implement subtle rules. And the future is about subtlety. And one thing which I think is completely forgotten is let's build an engine science-based financial system. Let's get away from these a priori principles. Let's use science to come up with the right answers.
Well, I'd say yes, but like speaking about subtlety and smart contracts, right? I think one of the big challenges is to be able to reconciliate the intent of what a contract is with how the contract is structured. Because we've seen that in the DAO and a lot of other hacks, there is danger there. So I believe the principles are still very important when it comes to what is the end goal and what are the principles you want to use? Because do you want to use anonymity or do you want to use transparency? It's very hard to manage the two.
But what this is why I mean a science-based approach. Science gives you clear answers. If there is no privacy, then a network collapses. So we can use science principles to tell us how to design it. And just think, my wife, she's biologist, does biology, and she's fascinated by the subtlety of nature. And nature is truly subtle. It's fascinating how it works, all the details. And now we have to understand everything that we have seen of DAOs or whatever it is. These are prototypes. So also Ethereum is a prototype. Bitcoin is a prototype. So let's fast innovate, but make sure that we, on this journey, have first generations of products.
No, I think you're right there in saying basically what we need is establish the right principles for the right purposes. So when it comes to certain data, it's got to be private. When it comes to certain data, it's got to be public in order for everybody to check. And so both of them are very useful for different purposes. But then the problem here is we come already from a legacy centralized world, and a big part of the centralized world is basically government and regulators. So maybe they also have to adapt to a new form of working, where most of what they would be asking is not necessarily something that should come from them, but rather from the market, asking, look, if we're doing this certain ways because the market needs this. Not because some bureau said this is how we were doing it before and this is what we want now.
So, for me, there are two requirements. Let's please make minimal changes on what we have. Because any changes require a lot of time. You have to talk to 1,000 people and everyone gets confused. So let's do minimal changes. But the second thing is, let's be what I call science-based. Because if you approach in the scientific engineering mind, you can do so much more than you'd ever guess. Look at the whole COVID vaccine, kind of success story. It is science. It's not first principles. It's going into details, doing the hard work, and the same spirit. Let's design the financial system with this in mind, and address the privacy debate in the same way. So normally it's private, but if this person has done certain thresholds, certain more information has to be revealed, and that can be kind of automated.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, because in principle Discord we like to speak about principles, and you telling me about a methodology, a scientific approach in solving problems. One of them is having these scientific principles and scientific approach. It's science, it's science, but it's also interpretation. Some people interpret things in the same science in different ways, and that's usually where the failure happens, right? It's at the wrong interpretation of the data, right? So, for example, do you think there is room for the principle of genuine mistakes, of legitimate mistakes? Should people also be able to, by trial and error, make mistakes and be responsible for their own mistakes? Because you're talking about COVID, the big debate is should we lock down, should we not lock down? Some people want to, some people don't want to. Do you think we should just take whatever scientists say, and by consensus just follow that consensus because they know better than us? Or do you think there is room for trial and error, and for those who want to take certain risks, they could take certain risks?
So a very important message of science is actually trial and error is an important feature of successful evolution.
Yeah.
Science can tell you that if you just try to do everything theoretical, you get it completely wrong. So you need to each other completely opposing principles and nurture them both. And now it's very counterintuitive. So if in So if you really want to be proactive, you have to nurture innovation on a small scale, give a lot of flexibility, and see what grows.
Yeah. Switching gears, I want to talk about and double click on the idea of price discovery, because I don't feel there's any price discovery whatsoever in the crypto market. I don't trust it. I don't trust it because it's concentrated in the wallets of a few, because we see that there is fake volume all over the place, and because I mean I'm used to book orders where there's level 1 and level 2 and certain efficiencies in doing things, canceling orders, and good execution. Question being, honestly, is there any price discovery now, and how can we solve that problem?
So first, you're raising a key question, absolutely key question. This is a very profound, important question. How can we solve price discovery? So, and this has been always my pain in this whole exercise, is kind of this rampant development of how it happens, and that it's so haphazard, and so this is a big issue. Now, I can tell you by analogy, which is very interesting, is even the most liquid market, which we know, like foreign exchange, is far more inefficient than you'd ever guess.
Okay.
So if you go into the market microstructure, really analyze the hard work, you see, my goodness, is this possible?
Yeah, go ahead, instruct us, because it's an important topic. What happens in the
Are
FX?
you aware? I mean, the foreign exchange market is the biggest market in the
Yes,
world.
for sure.
It's
yeah.
6 trillion per day. But now, have you ever divided the 6 trillion by the 80,000 seconds which you have per day?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you realize, my goodness, the volume which goes through the market at any 1 second is, for the full foreign exchange, is only 25 million. What? Only 25 million. Now, all these big players where anyone can press a button and issue an order for 100 million or even 1 billion. My goodness, then, and there's like kind of, there is combustion. And so then the price jumps too much. When the price jumps too much, there is a margin call. And when there is a margin call, actually the person has to close out his position, driving the price even further.
You're manipulating the price and using the same gestures. It's a short squeeze, right?
Exactly. So you have your GameStop story in a very strange string.
Yeah.
And so, in summary, yes, there are solutions.
Yeah.
And we have to nurture, but it's a very difficult journey to get there. But
I think we're learning something there, because you're right. There is plus and minuses in having a 24-hour market, because if you concentrate it in a 6-hour period, then the market's got to define the price during that period, and that's it. If you concentrate it over a 24-hour market all the time, then yes, you have the ability to trade all the time, but then, as you said, the volumes are thin sometimes. And when I look at the FX market, okay, if I want to manipulate it, I would wait until Australia wakes up, because nobody else is, and then I would just put my market orders during the Australian market, because everybody else is closed. So that's a very interesting point, and I never thought of that. So do you think it's a good thing then that we all robots trading 24/7 under the new paradigm, or do you think this might change?
So it has. So first of all, trading around the clock is very good. Volume is very good, and now something which is counterintuitive is actually the more volume, the faster, the better, the more stable it becomes. So it's actually, the answer is not to slow down, but to speed up. And when you speed up, you have to keep a few principles in mind, like something which today doesn't exist yet, but which has to develop is, I mean, we're starting to discover that on cryptos we can earn interest. But no one is yet offering intraday interest, second by second interest. And when you start to offer second by second interest, you can actually contribute massively to stability.
Yeah, but I mean, like the speed of execution right now is not the best if you want to do it in a decentralized way. I mean, look, I always say the importance is to identify the problems, because if you identify the problems and you have enough brains, then that means at some point those problems will be able to be solved. So having problems and knowing that there's a problem is a pretty positive thing, you know, given the amount of brains, but then given also the quality of the brains who are looking at those problems. And I think the crypto market is a pretty good you know, environment where a lot of very smart people in the end of the day are looking at those problems. So I'm pretty confident it's going to evolve the positive way. But now a little bit more esoterically, right? Machines are doing all of the trading. Machines are now going to do all the smart contracts. Machines this and machines that. Is there any room for human beings anymore? Because you know, you're talking about trading and market manipulation, then I guess a machine will solve it as well, you know, as soon as they see something going on like that. So uh, is there any market anyways anymore? Because maybe it's just machines who are going to take care of all of this, and whenever there is a human, we don't have a competitive advantage anymore, and we are pretty much going to a casino where machines are going to rip us off. Do you think this is the case, and this is where we go to, or do you think there's still chance for you know, non-efficient market being benefited by human beings?
So, I mean, first you're raising a very deep question about, you know, it goes beyond crypto markets. It goes about AI. You know,
Yeah.
how should we deal with it? And there, I mean, again, science gives us a very clear answer. I mean, very clear. And the answer is the following: that machines, including AI, is a service to us, to you. So they are not autonomous, by the way, in the following sense: that if we allow, and this is why the crypto world is so important, you can create your own cryptocurrency for your project you're doing, and that becomes its own metric for assets and liabilities. So each one of us has his own relativistic framework and system. So the big part of this, and this is why this revolution is so important, is we get away from everyone has to be the same. So we're going to a world where you are different with your objectives, what you're doing, I am different, etc. And that enhances our importance. So actually, we will be super important. And for each one of us, all these bots can help us to realize our projects, and the values will be different from the next guy who has his bot.
But to use your analogy of nature, Richard, because I think this is a very good analogy. When you look at nature, I happen to believe that nature is the closest thing to perfection, and so that we can't really compete to nature as human beings. We're flawed individuals, okay? And you're right. Everybody can create their microsystem and then, you know, engage with other systems and change things like that. But it doesn't mean that your golem, your creation, is either perfect or does what you want it to do. Sometimes you give birth to a baby and it becomes a Frankenstein. And what I mean by that is it's as simple as I can be a spoon manufacturer, right? But then the next person uses that spoon for wrongdoing and stabs someone with it, for example, or God knows what. Yeah. Sometimes you're not in control of your own baby, right? Sometimes you would just put on your system and then it will take on this and its own life.
If you look at nature, the dinosaurs which disappeared.
Yeah.
So nature is all about that. There is no guarantee in nature. Everything is a trial. And
are you optimistic about the human nature?
Of course. If we learn to move forward and embrace knowledge as a part of our bigger existence. So let's get away from, questioning our relevance. We're immensely relevant as long as we understand that the world is decentralized and, you live in your own world, I live in my own world. And occasionally, like now when we talk, these two worlds interact.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try to use Darwin to flip it back to the crypto side, like, because there is in nature there's Darwinism, and there's different the survival of the fittest. We have a centralized world now. We have a decentralized world that is coming. What is the future for the next 5 years as far as the crypto market is going? What is your vision?
I mean, I would argue that adoption will come faster than we think. And I think there are two very major trends happening. I mean, first of all, the technology and the speed with which blockchain, DeFi, kind of these technologies evolve is fantastic, just great. And we have to understand everything that we today see is still a prototype. Think of what it will look like in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So that's on the one hand. Then second, which we forget about, I mean, the macroeconomic situation is so extreme, it couldn't be more extreme. So what will happen, in my view, is the macroeconomic situation will kind of catalyze this movement to this new world. And
absolutely.
So what we have to do, and I think this is why a conversation like this is so valuable, is try to explain to the everyday person what it's all about. Because then we lose the fear of this new wave coming. If we hear what it's all about, how it works, and we can relate, then we're open to accepting it.
I think, Richard, the way you present things is pretty self-explanatory, because you touch on the point that when you use a scientific method and you have a bad idea and a good idea, truth always comes on top. And so at the end of the day, when you're competing ideas, right, and you implement those ideas, the more you test them, the more the truth comes forward. And I always say, for this crypto market, the biggest marketing of the crypto is actually the central banks, because central banks are doing what they believe is right, which the crypto market tends to believe is wrong, but they do it so much that they prove themselves wrong at some point. And it's almost inevitable, because if both ideas are being pushed constantly, at some point there's going to be a winner. And I think the winner is on the crypto side and on the decentralization side, on the principles on which the crypto market is based, which is mostly, basically freedom, also freedom of choice, of making mistakes and learning from them. So we're reaching the end of this interview, but is there anything you want to talk about concerning what you're doing, or what you think is the next big thing moving forward?
So of course, coming back to the very start is, I mean, Look at Lost has the right team to step by step improve liquidity, make liquid markets using engineering science from first principles. So but again, it's a step-by-step work where every week you have a small progress and sometimes it goes a jump. So that's one thing which we're doing. And we want to contribute there. The second thing is what I've been saying before. I mean, the real task and work at hand is to make any Tesla share, any kind of other bond, etc., to be tokenized. I want to be able to transfer other assets as a token, and do so at narrow spreads. And so we're kind of working on these two goals. And the next thing is for us then ultimately to go live with the OTF.
Right. So if you want to move to the tokenized world, if you want to move to it in a right way, you'll be able to contact Richard. I will put some of your social media and details on how to contact you on the video below as well. And until next time, thanks a lot, and I'll see you then.
We will stand on principle, or we will not stand at all.